du RGPD, qui est quand même la référence au niveau international. Donc, le deuxième niveau de contrainte se situe du point de vue international, les cadres de gouvernance des données. Je prends l'exemple de l'Alliance Smart Africa, qui a initié une vague de réformes et de politiques qui visent à poser un cadre harmonisé des politiques numériques. Et le Sénégal a eu aussi en charge le Data Protection Flagship. Donc des lignes directrices ont été émises. Et là aussi, cela demandait une mise en adéquation avec le cadre sénégalais actuel. Troisième niveau de contrainte, c'est l'encadrement des technologies émergentes. Je vais vous parler surtout de l'intelligence artificielle. Certaines technologies n'avaient pas fait l'objet d'un encadrement juridique. Donc, l'intelligence artificielle est basée en grande partie sur l'exploitation des données à caractère personnel. La masse de données qui est couplée à l'évolution de la technologie, surtout la puissance de calcul. Et là aussi, des règles ont dû être mises en place pour accompagner l'innovation sans bloquer l'innovation. Et dernière série de contraintes toujours d'ordre juridique, c'est la régulation des plateformes. On s'est rendu compte que les plateformes occupent une place très importante dans nos vies, les big tech, et il n'y a aucune règle qui puisse les encadrer de manière adéquate, la loi sénégalaise n'étant pas extraterritoriale, comme le serait par exemple le RGPD. Donc, toutes ces contraintes ont dû être repensées, analysées, afin de proposer un cadre juridique adéquat. D'un point de vue institutionnel, le défi, c'était de mettre en cohérence ce qui existe. Nous avons plusieurs régulations sectorielles. Un régulateur pour l'audiovisuel, un régulateur pour les communications électroniques, un régulateur pour les données à caractère personnel, un régulateur pour la cryptologie, un régulateur pour la sécurité des systèmes d'information, etc., etc. Donc, il arrive des situations où les régulateurs se marchent dessus du point de vue du domaine d'intervention. Et là, l'idée du chef de l'État actuellement, c'est de mettre en place une loi d'orientation sur les données, qui emporte la gouvernance des données, et de repenser toute cette architecture pour mettre en cohérence les compétences des régulateurs. Donc, je ne veux pas monopoliser la parole. Et puisque vous ne m'aviez pas indiqué le temps de parole au moment de parler, je pense que c'est quelques pistes de réflexion en attendant d'être relancées. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mamadou, and we'll come back to you on some of the challenges you've mentioned. We'll then move on to Paul, who works as a data policy advisor at the GIZ-AU office. And of course, GIZ-AU has been supporting the implementation of the Africa Union data policy framework and the African Digital Compact through the continuous process of monitoring good data governance in Africa and through your Datacipation program. Could you just tell us a bit more about the role that as a development partner you're playing in the implementation of these strategic frameworks within the African Union and its member states?
Thank you very much, Victor. As you've mentioned, my name is Paul Kithinji. I'm a data policy advisor with GIZ African Union, and particularly the Datacipation program that is housed within the GIZ AU portfolio. The portfolio itself is as a result of a bilateral agreement between the German government and the African Union. So basically what our program does is support harmonized and inclusive digital and data policies on the continent. And since January 2023, we have been working with the African Union to support the development and harmonization of data policy frameworks. And our approach basically looks like a top-down approach, where first we start with continental organizations, such as the AFCFTA, ODENEPAD, and the likes, and we trickle down this support to regional economic blocs, SADC, ECOWAS, and EAC. And then we also trickle down the support to the constituent partner states. So at partner state level, if you allow me to highlight, we have about 23 member states currently at various stages of receiving technical support. I'm very happy to see a gentleman by the name Mr. Baker from Uganda, who we have been in discussions, and we are in the process of rolling out the support to them. What we do, basically, we come in upon request to the African Union. We tailor support, and the intervention is two-pronged. So there's capacity building, and then there's a technical support for the development of data policies. And maybe just to highlight a key, maybe 3 or 4 lessons that we've picked up along the way since January 2023. We started out with identifying partners that we could work with, and making invites and trying to establish roadways through a regional approach. So in July 2023, we've had our first capacity building exercise, and then we simply rolled out the rest to the African continent. Something that we have also noticed since that time is that digital policy development is a very political process. It's political both at the regional level, it's political both at the rec level. It's, even if I say this, I say it with utmost respect, even on a continental level, it's not harmonized. As you might know, there are a couple of member states that have been sanctioned in Africa, and then that actually impedes our ability to support them. At regional level, there might be conflicts or disputes that makes it really hard to bring all these particular partners to the table to have a discussion on digital policies. Even down to the member states level, it's quite political because interests are always something to consider. Public interests, private interests, what people would like to see in terms of this digital policies, and to see it to the end. The other thing that we've seen, there is a very great need for digital data policies on the continent. As of now, as I said, we have received requests from about 23 member states. Also at rec level, all the recs that we're currently working with have expressed great interest. And maybe I can point out the work that we're doing with SADC. Currently, we are doing an amendment, a review to the supplementary law, supplementary act to personal data protection. Tail end, we're supposed to have a final validation next month. Where there is need, both for technical can do is just try and onboard them and put them onto the process. It looks like sending out the request to African Union, meeting, discussing, strategizing on how to deliver this support. But on the and lastly, from where we sit, as I said, our approach is a harmonized one and an inclusive one. We tend to really emphasize to our partners and partner states, and even our implementation partners, that we ask, please bring to the table the CSOs, bring to the table academia, the technical communities, bring to the table private sector, because ideally these policies that are being developed are not supposed to be tailored to one particular group, but to everyone. And that actually is how we achieve a human-centric policy in place. And so for us, it's a process where for the next 2-3 years, we are geared to driving at a human-centric approach to policy development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I'm sure in the next round we'll want to hear more about some of the challenges you faced, looking at it from a continental view, and of course the different factors that are at play when looking at data policy. I'll come to Tala, and now from a technical perspective, what would then be the primary challenges that you see African governments facing when trying to implement or when implementing data-driven governance, especially around the issues of security, data accessibility, capacity building, and also infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll be following Professor, so I'm going to do my contribution in French. My name is Talan Jai. I work for DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance at the United Nations Foundation. And prior to DIAL, I led also the technical assist. Yes, the technical assistance to the Senegalese government to develop the first national data strategy, and also government of Ghana to develop their first data strategy, along with the Alliance of Smart Africa. Donc, pour répondre directement à la question, sur les défis, ou en tout cas les premiers défis techniques que les gouvernements ou États africains rencontrent, le premier, il est lié à la connectivité. Donc, si vous regardez en Afrique, il n'y a que principalement les milieux urbains qui sont interconnectés en fibre optique. Actuellement, le développement commence. Il y a des initiatives qui accompagnent les États à améliorer les infrastructures telles que des câbles sous-marins. Il y en a en Afrique qui sont là, mais au niveau à l'intérieur des pays, il y en a encore qui manquent. Et ce qui fait que les procédures administratives ou les services publics ne sont pas totalement digitalisés. Donc beaucoup d'États ont initié des programmes ou des stratégies de transformation numérique, notamment le Sénégal, l'agenda aussi numérique au Ghana, pour permettre une meilleure connectivité, un préalable à la connectivité. Le deuxième challenge après cette connectivité, c'est la disponibilité des services en ligne, parce que si les services ne sont pas digitalisés, des données ne seront pas aussi digitalisées, et toute l'intelligence qui doit ou qui peut être appliquée sur ces données dans un esprit d'amélioration du service n'existe pas. Donc le deuxième, c'est un manque de disponibilité des services en ligne. Et le troisième, c'est un problème de formation, d'acculturation de la majeure partie ou de certains décideurs publics et des agents de l'État dans l'utilisation des services numériques pour répondre aux demandes des citoyens. Donc sur toute la chaîne, si on regarde, il y a principalement ces manquements qui sont ressortis de beaucoup d'assessments que nous avons conduits aussi bien au Sénégal, en Sierra Leone, au Ghana, ou qu'on a lu à travers des revues de littérature sous-régionales ou régionales. Donc c'est des manquements qui sont là. Et ce qui crée un gap par rapport aux attentes actuelles dans l'utilisation de la donnée ou de l'intelligence appliquée sur la donnée pour améliorer le service public pour les États, mais pour améliorer également les services pour le secteur privé. Donc de plus en plus, au niveau du secteur privé, nous avons des stratégies data-driven qui visent à utiliser la donnée comme premier instrument d'aide à la décision pour les top management, mais il n'y en a pas encore qui sont très aboutis. Si je prends le cas du Sénégal, je ne peux citer que deux grandes banques ou un acteur du secteur des télécoms qui ont réussi les premiers jalons de ces transformations digitales. Donc, mais si je prends l'exemple du Sénégal, l'État a mis en place un data center certifié Design Tier 3+, pour permettre d'héberger, de localiser toutes les données du service public au Sénégal. Donc, pour rejoindre ce que le professeur a dit, c'est une ambition du président de faire localiser toutes les données du service public dans ce data center-là. Le deuxième, c'est une digitalisation des états civils. Donc, cela a commencé. Donc, le premier niveau, c'est une digitalisation cloisonnée des services d'abord. Et le deuxième niveau, ce sera une interopérabilité, une interconnectivité de ces états civils, de ces administrations-là. Le troisième, c'est un manque de puissance de calcul au niveau des États. Il y en a des États qui ont investi sur des supercalculateurs comme le Sénégal. Bon, Ghana, ils sont un peu en avance sur ça. Donc, pour mettre à la disposition des chercheurs, des universitaires et des entrepreneurs des puissances de calcul pouvant leur permettre de tester des algorithmes d'intelligence artificielle sur des données volumineuses. Donc, et le troisième, c'est naturellement l'exploration des données environnementales, des données satellitaires. Ça aussi, l'Afrique était un peu en retard sur la disponibilité de données géospatiales, mais nous avons vu récemment un investissement sur des satellites au niveau de l'Afrique, pouvant permettre également aux chercheurs d'avoir la main sur la collecte, le traitement et la mise à disposition de données satellitaires pour résoudre des problématiques climatiques ou environnementales. Le Sénégal a lancé son satellite tout récemment et je pense que ça s'inscrit également sur cet agenda. Donc si on regarde la chaîne de valorisation de la donnée, au niveau de chaque segment, il y a des manquements qui sont là, mais les initiatives des États visant à digitaliser, interconnecter les administrations et les villes est un premier niveau. Le deuxième, c'est l'interopérabilité. Le Ghana a un framework d'interopérabilité pour guider ou harmoniser la façon avec laquelle les données sont collectées, sauvegardées, mais également échangées entre les différentes administrations. Donc, c'est quelques initiatives qui sont en cours pour pallier aux défis techniques que les écosystèmes rencontrent de part et d'autre. Voilà, pour ne pas trop monopoliser.
Thank you very much, Tala, for those insights into the challenges and, of course, a lot on the Senegalese case. One of the things that, one of the ways that one of the groups that also engages quite a lot with data governance is research and academic research, and this is where we bring in to contribute into building data governance policies and also building trust in data governance policies in Africa and across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. So academic research and civil society contributing to building public trust in data governance policies is definitely through research, and by this they do provide analysis data on data governance issues on the whole data governance continuum, right from collection and then and the whole value chain of data governance. So this offers evidence to support decision making, but also for instance, some of the universities that I have seen do work around data governance and provide this kind of analysis on data governance policies and practices is the Strathmore University in Kenya. And then there's also the data governance and unit in the University of Johannesburg. They're also doing that kind of work. Those are the two for Makerere University, where I come from as a student, but also I work at policy. So I have not seen work around data governance. But apart from that, it is also civil society organizations that are doing a lot of research work about data governance policies and sharing this work with government. Many other civil society organizations do this. Policy does this. Torodev, Niel, Kiktanet, Article 19, and so on and so forth. So the other thing, apart from doing research and sharing issues on data governance, there is also transparency and accountability. Most of the time, academic research follows ethical code of conduct. That is one big plus for them, which we don't do a lot of many times in civil society. We try to bypass the ethical code of conduct. We only do, informed consent, verbal consent, but, writing the protocol, getting it approved, going through those processes. We do, but not, it is still at a lower level, and we need to scale up in that area. So academic research, in most times, they follow that whole protocol, they get clearance, and this builds a lot of trust in the research that they do, even as a civil society, because I have seen when we go to do research as policy, we are asked, did you get ethical clearance? Who gave you this ethical clearance? So we have to show the letters, from the Ethical Review Board. We have to show letters from Uganda National Council of Science and Technology, where the research has been registered. So this builds trust. Even the people, the research subjects where we are collecting data, when you tell them and you show them letters, they gain trust in the work that you're doing, but also this work gains credibility. So most times academic research does this, but also the other thing in terms of transparency and accountability, civil society does the advocacy most of the time. Academia also does advocacy, but civil society does this a lot of many times, holding government and other stakeholders accountable, on data governance processes, to see that they involve the data subjects, we see they involve the public in data governance practices so that they can gain trust, right from collection, right from even designing the whole processes. So again, the other civil society organizations I already talked about, they do this most of the time. And then also civil society and public and academia rather, they do capacity strengthening in terms of implementing sound and clear data governance practices, training especially government partners in the different sectors. I know Torodev has done this training, Evidence Methods Lab has done the same. We as policy have also done training with government partners from cities in Uganda. So however, in doing all this, in trying to do our work as civil society, but also the academia, to gain, to build public trust in data governance policies, they are challenges. And these challenges then come in as barriers, in these processes. And one of the key challenges, I will mention three key ones. One is limited public engagement. We find ourselves collecting data from the public, but engaging them more than beyond data collection is usually a problem. We don't involve them. We find ourselves even many times we are disseminating to, the government officials, civil society representation, but we don't have, people from whom we collected this data. We need to bring them on board. We need to involve them, not only as data subjects, but they need to listen. They need to come and be part of the dissemination workshops. We need to break down the data that we collect from them, the reports that we have made, the policies that we have generated. We need to break them down for them in smaller, consumable aspects, and so that they can be able to understand what did we collect them, what have we come up with, what are these policies that we have developed. So engaging the public in data governance practices at all levels is very important. It's something that we are not yet doing, we are not yet there. Then the other one is there is limited involvement of women in data governance practices. Women are the greatest data subjects. Most of the data is collected from women. Even if it is general and it wasn't really looking at a woman, it is a woman mostly that you'll find at home and will respond to these questions that you have. But now involving them again beyond the data collection process is also a challenge. data is not disaggregated. There's limited gender data, you know. There are few women at all the other data governance, you know, levels, you know. In analysis, they are limited. The women are very few in analyzing data. There are also women, they are very few in dissemination processes. Look at the panel here. We are talking about data governance. I am just one woman, you know. So this is evidence that, you know, there is limited participation and involvement of women in data governance practices and processes. So we need to work on that one. Then the other challenge, the key one, is stakeholders in data governance ecosystem working in silos. You'll find that the government stakeholders, they are producing their data. Civil society, we are producing our data. Government is not trusting ours. We are also not working with theirs, you know, but we are working around the same thing, you know. They are producing, I have seen a report, you know, on OGBV, and I felt like I wanted to cry. It was produced by a government organization back in my country. But, you know, the variables they had were very limited. It's very shallow, honestly saying. Looking at the work that we have done on OGBV as policy, OGBV is online gender-based violence. We have so many variables that bring out the aspect, you know. So even in data governance, you find that we are working in silos. The National Statistics Office is the only one that should be doing this work, you know. And then civil society, we are doing the same work actually, you know. So why not come together and look at this thing? So you'll find that there is a challenge. What indicators are we using? What variables are we using? What questionnaires? What are the tools and that kind of thing, because of working in silos. And then at the end of the day, we are producing reports, you know. It is around the same thing, but we have different, you know, we are speaking different languages. We have it is good to have different results, but can we, you know, harmonize these things and work together and speak the same language? Even if we are going to collect data, if we have standardized tools, for instance, you know, we will not miss out on most of these things. But you find they have their tools, we have our tools, they have their own way of analyzing, we have our own way as civil society. So working in silos, we even miss the gaps. We miss the problem. So that is what I can say for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bonita, for that very passionate presentation. And still on research, our panelist at large has finally arrived. And we'll be keen to hear from you, Paul. And also this panel has two Pauls. So Paul 1, Paul 2, Paul JZ, Paul CIPESA. So Paul from CIPESA, what were the key findings from CIPESA's research on data governance in Africa, and especially around how national policies are aligning with regional frameworks, in especially what you highlighted in that research, or perhaps also what should be or should have been considered? In brief, maybe 5 minutes or so now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Victor. I am not at large. It is just that the data was mismanaged, and I was put in 2 sessions at the same time. But I'm happy to be here. And it is good I arrived when Bonita was just concluding, because I think most of what I'm going to share really resonates with what she has been sharing. So we have done a number of research studies around the data governance, data localization, and issues around the data, especially on the continent. And I think data governance and maybe data localization are 2 of the issues that many countries and the organizations are still grappling with. We appreciate that data is important, but then how do we manage it? How do we harmonize it and make sure it serves the purpose for which it is intended? And we acknowledge that from our side, well, we are happy that many countries across the continent have developed and legislated on privacy and data protection, which are key policies that help us in the way we manage, the way we process, and the way we use our data. And of course, we all know that and acknowledge that data collection is very important, one, for planning purposes, especially for government. But as Bonita said, even as our research is telling us that there is not enough disaggregation of data that will help in the planning purposes for government, especially if you don't know how many people with disabilities that you have in your country, then it becomes hard for you to plan properly, because one, you need to be sure of one, the numbers, but also the categories and the severity, and also the gender of the different disabilities that you have in your country. And so many countries are coming up with data protection laws. Unfortunately, for many countries, they are focusing inwardly, in that the principles are good, that, well, we need to protect data for our citizens. We need all data to be stored in country, but it has challenges. When you talk to data controllers, especially people in government, why is it important for you to promote data localization, prohibit encryption of data, but also require that data controllers and maybe data processors store their data in country. Some of the reasons they provide are good in principle, but I think poorly thought out. One is they want to protect citizens' data, which is okay, but also the sovereignty of the data, which is okay. But we do not a lot of times think about the benefits of having data shared. And the principles that we have in our national laws are not robust enough, because we lack many oversight mechanisms, because they don't want to share data outside of the countries, but inside anybody is able to access the data, especially national security offices. And I think this causes a lot of disharmony within the public, and so you would notice that for many data collection programs that are going on, the intention is good, but there is limited awareness of the citizens as to why government is collecting the data, but also there is poor implementation of the data protection laws, because for many of our national laws, data collectors are required to inform the data citizens the reasons as to why they are collecting their data, but this is never done, especially if you look, we examine many of the forms that are used to collect data for national IDs or SIM card registration. Citizens are not allowed or even informed as to why the certain amount of data is being collected, and if the data is going, what data is going to be used for, and we have had incidents where that data has been shared. So the laws are lacking in terms of robustness to ensure that there is oversight, but also there is clarity, and that data breaches are held, are punished. And so at the African continental level, there are initiatives to promote that cross-border sharing of data, because it is important for our economy. So there is also a disconnect between what is being promoted at the continental level and at the national level. What is so ironical is that these continental frameworks are legislated upon by government representatives at the AU level. But when they come in country, then also they change tune, and they say, no, we need to protect our data. But at continental level, they're like, okay, we need to be sharing our data so that it can be used for economic purposes. And there are costs also to data localization, because for many companies, if you are required to build a data center in each of the countries where you're operating, it means you are going to spend. So I think the principles are good, but the legislation is poorly drafted and even poorly implemented. So we need to do a bit more, one, to engage our national governments, because maybe they are scared, maybe they are not, to explain and say, okay, yes, principally the localization is good, but what should be the minimum grounds for us to consider when we are legislating and punishing most of the data controllers to ensure that they do that localization. If a company like MTN, you are operating across the continent, must you have data centers in each of the countries? But also, if we are to allow you to maybe store data in one central place, maybe in South Africa, what should be the safeguards that you can give a country that, well, if I store people's data in South Africa, one, South Africa has laws that provide for safeguards of citizens' data. So we need, the laws are not speaking to each other. So we need to want to have the laws harmonized. And yeah, the laws should be harmonized, countries to be speaking to each other, and then we shall see progress. But if we do not do that, I think there is a lot of infighting, sovereignty, and then at African continental level, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. And I think we'll stick to what you've just said towards the very end around data sovereignty, and I'll go to Prof. Mamadou. Around how does Senegal balance this national data sovereignty vis-a-vis regional frameworks at the AU, at the African continental level, just in brief, like 5 minutes or less.
Merci. Donc, le Sénégal n'avait pas encore de stratégie définie en matière de souveraineté numérique. Donc, comment cela est en train d'être construit? C'est à 3 niveaux. Donc, le premier niveau, c'est un niveau de définition du périmètre de la souveraineté. Parce qu'on parle de gouvernance des données, la souveraineté ne peut pas s'appliquer à toutes les données. Il faut sélectionner les données qui vont faire l'objet de mesures dérogatoires. Donc, c'est la classification des données. Actuellement, il y a un groupe qui est chargé de réfléchir sur la classification des données en définissant des CI. Ce qui a été retenu pour l'instant, sans violer mon obligation de réserve par rapport à ce groupe de travail, c'est que les données publiques ou les données administratives, pour ne pas créer d'équivoque, les données administratives vont faire l'objet d'une souveraineté, en plus des données qui seront jugées stratégiques par les pouvoirs publics. Donc, comment cette souveraineté va être garantie d'un point de vue juridique? C'est d'exiger une localisation stricte des données au Sénégal. Donc, la territorialisation des données va permettre d'appliquer toutes les mesures dérogatoires. Donc, la localisation, je vais y revenir tout à l'heure en analysant avec les autres stratégies. Et troisième CI, c'est une marge nationale d'appréciation. Ce n'est pas parce que les données administratives vont être obligatoirement localisées au Sénégal qu'elles ne peuvent pas faire l'objet d'un partage ou d'une circulation. Donc, il y a une marge nationale d'appréciation qui, en cas de nécessité, peut amener des dérogations. Donc, on peut éventuellement partager ces données sous quelques réserves. Évidemment, cela va un peu à l'encontre de la tendance actuelle avec la stratégie de gouvernance des données de l'Union africaine, avec les travaux de la ZLECAf, les travaux un peu de Smart Africa, ou même la révision de l'acte additionnel, parce qu'il y a différentes interprétations d'un point de vue juridique. Est-ce que ces espaces créent une obligation pour les États de partager, de mettre en commun et de circulariser leurs données, ou est-ce que les États ont quand même, dans ce mouvement de partage et de circulation, de valorisation des données, la possibilité de soustraire un ensemble de données afin de promouvoir un intérêt national? Donc, en l'état actuel, comment le Sénégal fait la balance? C'est de dire une catégorie des données sont des données stratégiques. Ces données restent au Sénégal et c'est l'État qui définit la politique d'utilisation de ces données. Pour le reste des données, ces données peuvent faire l'objet de partage au sein de certaines infrastructures de confiance, à l'instar des opérateurs X-Road ou d'autres supports techniques qui permettent de partager les données. Voilà pour rester dans la limite des 5 minutes et de laisser le choix aux autres de pouvoir s'exprimer.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mamadou. And I think still around that topic, back to Tala, is around, because a lot of the times the conversations around sovereignty, data sovereignty come from also businesses and how they approach the whole question of cross-border data flows. The question to you would be around successful data governance initiatives that have actually benefited both businesses and citizens, and what lessons can we draw from such initiatives, looking at your expertise also in business and government support on data, just in under 5 minutes also.
Great, thank you. I believe we have a lot of ongoing initiatives on data governance. I will take few examples of failures first, and then the successful ongoing project. Donc, pour parler des réussites en tant qu'initiative de gouvernance des données, je vais peut-être commencer par les tentatives qui n'ont pas forcément abouti, pour en arriver aux initiatives qui sont en cours et sur lesquelles nous fondons beaucoup d'espoir parce que les approches considèrent les problématiques auparavant rencontrées dans les initiatives. Donc, sur une approche top-down, nous avons vu à la suite du lancement de la EU Data Policy Framework, au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest également, la CEDEAO, ECOWAS, ils ont initié une mise à jour ou en tout cas des évolutions des lois sur la protection des données avec des politiques d'harmonisation des données ou des initiatives autour des données. Donc si je prends l'exemple du Ghana, nous avons vu avant les années 2020 qu'il y avait un projet sur l'adressage numérique, Digital Address. Et donc c'est un projet qui était peut-être techniquement costaud, mais qui a rencontré quelques challenges pour la mise à l'échelle. Et parmi les challenges rencontrés, un est d'ordre culturation, la formation ou le niveau d'alphabétisation des citoyens qui doivent utiliser une plateforme numérique pour peut-être le français, l'anglais ou une autre langue. L'autre barrière, c'est le niveau de vie ou de développement ou l'aisance financière des citoyens, parce que pour accéder à ces applications, il faut acheter de l'Internet des données, qui a un certain coût pour pouvoir bénéficier de ce service-là. Le troisième, il est d'ordre aussi technique, il faut avoir un smartphone. Et ça, beaucoup d'Africains rencontrent ces challenges-là. C'est un des problèmes qui n'a peut-être pas permis de mettre à l'échelle ce projet-là, qui est aussi un learning pour le Sénégal, qui est en train de développer son système d'adressage des données. Et si on regarde un niveau beaucoup plus régional également, il y a des initiatives sous-régionales au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, comme un accompagnement de la Banque mondiale pour avoir des plateformes interopérables entre les gouvernements au niveau de la CEDEAO. Donc ça s'appelle World Project. Et avant d'implémenter techniquement ce projet-là, il y a beaucoup de phases sur lesquelles les États sont pas forcément pour répondre à ce projet-là, mais parce que les États également ont tous compris qu'il faudrait développer des politiques pour ouvrir les données publiques, pour de l'innovation ou pour du développement durable ou pour l'humanitaire. Il faut développer des politiques pour harmoniser l'interopérabilité et l'échange de données entre les administrations. Et donc ça, la Mauritanie également l'a réussi parce que l'année dernière, ils ont développé une stratégie d'ouverture des données et ils sont en train de développer la plateforme d'ouverture des données avec un cadre d'interopérabilité des données. Dans un premier temps, pour répondre aux problèmes nationaux, et dans un second temps, pour pouvoir être interopérable avec les pays voisins et la CEDEAO aussi, qui est la communauté sous-régionale la plus proche. Et pour les défis, si nous regardons au niveau de l'Afrique, la technologie arrive, les technologies émergentes arrivent, nous sommes en train de digitaliser ou de numériser les données. Mais comme vous le savez tous, il ne peut y avoir de développement sans inclusivité et les problématiques ou les échecs des projets de données ou des initiatives de gouvernance des données ont révélé que des centaines de millions d'Africains sont laissés derrière parce que considérés comme illettrés. Je ne sais pas si quelqu'un dans la salle peut me donner la taille de la population en Afrique. Juste un chiffre, un number. How many are we? How many Africans are we? Almost 2 billion, 1.3 billion. That's a number. From 2021 statistic, do you have better number? The size of the population in Africa. Do you have an idea how many Africans are we? So. Yeah, we're around 1 billion, 1.3 billion, 1.5. Yes, 1.4 African. But we have 400 million considered as illiterate, because we can't read or they can't read, they can't read. Et quand on parle d'alphabétisation, on dit il faut savoir lire ou il faut savoir écrire. Alors que si on regarde la science, ces personnes ne sont pas en réalité illettrées parce qu'elles savent au moins comprendre une langue, elles savent au moins s'exprimer à travers une langue, elles savent lire une vidéo, l'interpréter. Donc je pense que c'est ça le challenge que beaucoup de pays africains font face avec une multitude de langues que la majeure partie ou la moitié de la population ne sait s'exprimer qu'à travers ces langues. Et c'est des audios, c'est des vidéos. Donc vous connaissez tous OpenAI qui est un chatbot, donc où il y en a d'autres qui existent. Un chatbot, c'est un agent conversationnel. Tu peux écrire, tu peux t'exprimer avec un audio et l'agent te répond avec du texte, avec de l'image ou avec un document. Aujourd'hui, le challenge ou l'opportunité qui se présente en utilisant ces technologies émergentes, et c'est ce que aussi des cas d'usage autour des industries créatives au niveau de la culture également, qui sont en train d'être explorés au Sénégal de manière inclusive. Donc il y a les décideurs publics, il y a le secteur privé, il y a le milieu académique, il y a les entrepreneurs qui sont inclus dans cette réflexion. Et l'idée est de digitaliser les données ou les instruments musicaux pour les rendre et les mettre à disposition au monde de l'art ou au monde de la musique ou du son. Donc ce qui est en train d'être fait avec les données artistiques ou musicales, c'est la même chose qui est en train d'être faite avec les natural language processing qui permettent de digitaliser les langues africaines et de pouvoir inclure ces 400 millions d'Africains dans les processus de réflexion, mais également de pouvoir utiliser le numérique pour du service public ou pour acheter, pour vendre ou pour s'interconnecter avec le monde. C'est ça l'opportunité majeure. Et mon rêve à moi, c'est demain, quelqu'un qui est au village, qui ne sait ni lire ni écrire, puisse ouvrir son téléphone avec son application, peu importe, et de s'exprimer à travers sa langue et de demander un document ou un acte administratif à son État et que cet État lui envoie cet acte administratif avec cet outil-là, suivant sa langue. Et c'est ça, ce sont les initiatives qui sont en cours au niveau de... Il y en a au Sénégal, des startups qui digitalisent ces langues. Nous l'avons au Kenya, nous l'avons aussi au Ghana. Et c'est ça qui permettra d'arriver à ce niveau de gouvernance des données inclusive. Donc j'insiste beaucoup sur le mot inclusif. Merci.
Thank you very much, Tala. And yeah, inclusive is very important. Because of time, I'll move quickly and I'll ask the next speakers to be quite quick. Paul, back to you, and of course you'd shared quite a lot on the experience of GIZ in supporting digital transformation across the continent. And one of the questions that we have often asked and has been around what lessons have emerged, but also looking at the regional versus national conversation. Where in your experience do you feel the countries you're extending support to actually want to fall? Do African countries want a regional law or a regional framework, or are they keen on national frameworks?
Thank you. Maybe just by a show of hands, how many people have read the AUDPF?
The AUDPF?
The African Union
Data
Policy Framework. Okay, thank you so much. I think first, before we answer that question, we need to address that particular gap. It's very important for us to look at what we have. And the African Union in the past few years has been very adamant on passing and legislating policy frameworks that touch on digital transformation. Case in point, the Digital Transformation Strategy 2020 to 2030. I think it's very important that we start from that perspective. And then from that perspective, we recognize that at REC level, there are certain benefits and certain conversations that must happen at that level. And that's how Africa is structured, you know. At the continental level, we have, you know, the AU and its organs. At the REC level, we have these regional economic blocks that play a certain specific role, and at the member state. So maybe just to react to that position, I think it's a question about what are you trying to achieve at the end of the day in terms of data governance. And data governance in itself is so wide, right? So it's just not about cross-border data flows and data localization. It's also about data protection and privacy. It's also about continental approaches to trade, right? Because at the core of this is a wider picture of creating a single market, right? A single market that allows for free movement of people, services, and goods. So it's very important that we question and query what particular agenda we have at the end of the day before we determine whether member states prefer a regional economic one, a regional approach or a member state one. But maybe just to throw a spanner in the works is to point out that the African Union data policy framework is not binding. It's simply a tool, and if you view it as such, it determines the kind of interventions that follow, right? It is a tool. And so just to react to what Paul said about, you know, at the continental level, you have member states arguing for this particular agenda, you know, on data localization and this, that, and the other. And then when they come home, they're very stiff. I think the approach is recognizing the agenda, the purpose for which they do that, and also having in your local setting, you know, as a civil society organization, as academia, as private sector, public sector, the technical community, the media, is having an agenda that you bring forth to the state actor, right? You tell them, look, if you're going to pass a data protection law, if you're going to pass a national data strategy, if you're going to pass, you know, a cross-border, you know, policy framework, please keep in mind X, Y, Z that aligns with the values and aspirations that you'd like to see at your member state level. So for me, I think I'd want to have two bites at the cherry and say both regional and national data policies are good, but they play very integral roles. And what we want to do is, if there's anything that you take away from this, is to have a harmonized approach, right? From member state level to REC level to continental. So that when we're talking about the African continental free trade area, we understand that, you know, if I sell my goods across, you know, the borderline, my data is safe, right? The data of my customers are safe. That, you know, I can transfer money, I can move there, I can send my school kids there, and their data is safe, and the systems are aligned. So at the end of the day, that's the goal in mind. And as GIZ, we are here to collaborate with the African Union and its constituent member states to make this possible. So I think that's my parting shot. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think at this point I will open it up to questions before I come to some concluding remarks from the panel. So are there any questions from the floor, from plenary? Any questions on the session? So there's two hands. I'll start at the extreme back. I don't know if there's another mic. Maybe I'll just use this one. So I'll start at the extreme end and then come to you.
Thank you. This question goes to Paul of GIZ AU. You've talked about the AU data policy framework and the number of initiatives, especially to do with aligning the different data governance frameworks, but also existing data protection. How will this be done? I'll give examples. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has the digital protocol that specifically talks about cross-border data transfers, specifically to do with digital trade. Work is already moving too fast, and over 80% almost of the African countries have already adopted it. On the other hand, you already said you're supporting SADC with their model law to do with data protection. GIZ supported ECOWAS as well. Some work is going on within the ESC. We are talking about harmonizing, but so many parts are moving. And yet, starting at the African Union level, how are you ensuring that all these moving parts are actually working in harmony to avoid having disconcerted efforts. Thank you. My name is Bekabiri Kuja. I'm from Uganda, Uganda's data protection regulator.
Thank you. So there's two questions here, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Ok, bonjour. Je suis Bazier Charles du Burkina Faso, de l'organisation Youth Open Data, qui travaille beaucoup sur les questions de Open Data, Open Gov également. Ma question, en fait, c'est par rapport aux initiatives qui sont mises en place pour l'Open Data, bien sûr en lien avec l'Open Gov. Comment est-ce qu'on pourrait assurer la pérennité de ces initiatives? Je prends le cas du Burkina Faso où il y a eu en fait une plateforme qui a été mise en place où on alimentait régulièrement en fait cette plateforme de données ouvertes et tout ça. Mais à quelque part, il y a eu un souci de continuité. Et aujourd'hui, par rapport à l'accès des données, il est souvent très compliqué d'avoir des données à jour qui souvent aussi ne sont pas répondent peut-être forcément ou bien n'ont pas le format adapté en fait pour pouvoir être réutilisé pour développer en fait des solutions pratiques. L'autre question, c'est par rapport à l'implication même des jeunes dans la gouvernance des données. Quelle approche est-ce que la GIZ ou bien l'Union africaine en fait ont, ou bien quelles sont les initiatives qu'ils ont pour permettre aux jeunes de s'impliquer davantage dans les initiatives de promotion des données pour la bonne gouvernance? Parce qu'aujourd'hui, je prends le cas de notre organisation, c'est vrai qu'à un moment on est limité, on mène souvent des actions, mais si est-ce qu'il y a cette possibilité peut-être d'avoir l'accompagnement de l'Union africaine ou bien de la GIZ en fait pour pouvoir en fait impulser et accroître en fait nos actions, pourquoi pas ne pas dupliquer même les initiatives en fait que nous menons en place pour permettre à plus de jeunes en fait de pouvoir s'imprégner en fait de cette nouvelle approche qui a quelque part un rôle très important pour la bonne gouvernance dans nos sociétés qui souvent ne sont pas du tout agréables. Merci.
Very quickly, my name is Chris Maloney. I'm a program officer with the Hewlett Foundation in California. I was wondering if you might be able to speak to how we can better align the explosion of AI strategies that are now coming on top of all of these data governance strategies. I would argue that data governance and AI are pretty much one and the same when we're thinking about governance. They're just different flavors. And especially now that we have arguably two AI strategies within the same organization, the AU, what do we do about that? Thanks.
All right, I think those will be the only questions. So I think many of them were GIZ, AU, and then we can have.
I feel like I'm being ambushed. But anyway, I'll start with Baker. I think this is a question that, you know, sometimes keeps me up at night because more often than not, it's my responsibility alongside my colleagues to plan a lot of these interventions surrounding data governance and particularly even at member state level. So the very easy, because I feel like that really allows us to jump forward in terms of implementation. In essence, if you're to design an intervention at member state level, at REC level, first of all, you have to bring all those participants to a certain level of understanding, right? And then once you've done that, you then slowly introduce this technical support. You do stakeholder mapping, you do the, you know, collecting of views and data, everything. You design the draft policy, you take it to the validation process, but it has to start with capacity building. Stakeholder to a certain level of understanding. Once we do that, we can then really jump through the hurdles of designing things that align. And I know, as you said, it seems as if there are so many moving parts. I think it's very important to also highlight the place of awareness, aside from capacity, the place of awareness, what's really going on. So as you rightfully pointed out, the FCFTA have rolled out a digital trade protocol, which is currently being negotiated for annexures. And there's an annexure on data governance. And what I can say is that there are tools and resources in place to enable, you know, negotiating parties, member states, experts, ministers, all these people who sit at the table to discuss. If you look at the provisions of the digital trade protocol, they seem to restrict, data localization and impede sovereignty to some extent for the benefit of digital trade. But it also, in essence, also provides for exceptions where it says, where there's national interest, there's this particular interest, then we can limit the amounts of data and the types of data that is flowing out of our sovereign territory. So I think it's very important to be aware of those provisions. One, if you could have access to those, read those documents. Over and above that, the GIZ, and particularly something I'm very proud of, just today we shared with the African Union a tool that we've been in many months in developing, a tool to equip negotiators. So if you're a negotiator or a negotiator sitting here, I think early this year, at the last executive council meeting, there was an endorsement of a guide tool, and I've shared this with you, Becca, back in Dar es Salaam. So the tool ideally helps negotiators identify approaches to negotiating data governance provisions within trade agreements. And that tool should not only be limited to the AFCFTA guide, but also to other FTAs and I'd say bilateral trade agreements, right? So I'd put it to you to actually inquire of where we are, and then if you can also participate in the capacity building. As I said, we take an inclusive approach. So we wouldn't want to come to our member state, and as I said, we're working in 23 member states. We want to bring in people from all sectors. As I said, all stakeholders are welcome to the data. Then they can adequately better the argument, better the output of the policy documents. So Baker, I think the question about too many moving parts, I totally see where you're coming from, and I share the same sentiment. But I think the next gentleman had a question on sustainability. I'm not so sure about open data activities or initiatives in Burkina Faso, but from Kenya, and maybe we can have a discussion as well. So the GIZ in Nairobi, and I'm sure there's one in Ghana, there's one being set up here in Senegal as well, there's one in Rwanda, has a digital transformation center. And the one in Nairobi has an initiative on open data where we work with government officers and the academia to develop standards for open data. So I think this is something that we can discuss because I'm not particularly sure about Burkina Faso, but I'm sure there are initiatives about it. Now, in terms of the youth, this is something that, again, I'm really proud because I feel like a lot of my work is coming out today. So we give grants to the UNIGF Secretariat, and we also give grants to the APC, who run the African School of Internet Governance. And as part of the call right now, maybe if you're interested, I could take your name up and suggest it to them, is that we often, before the IGF roles, provide both financial support and technical support to various groups of people. One being the members of parliament, some of who are here today, and the other is youth. And we provide facilities for them to attend IGFs and the African School of Internet Governance. And we have done this, and we have set up a grant for the next 2 years. So if you're interested, please, I will share with you some contacts. Please send your name. And particularly for this year, we are doing, the African School of Internet Governance is doing a themed on data governance and digital trade, in line of obviously passing of the digital trade protocol. To Chris, I think the question on AI strategy, I think it's a bit political, if I'm being honest. But I think, again, where do we start? Where do we start? I often transformation. Look at the transformation. Look at the years and years of being left behind through economic development. So I think there is a thread. Particularly, I think the other question is the purpose for each policy document. I think it's up to us to investigate why we have a continental strategy, and a governance framework, those two documents have a different purpose. So I think once we understand why we have those policy documents in place and determine the harmonization with already pre-existing policy frameworks, because as I said, the African Union moves in that direction, and it's something that they're very adamant about. They do not simply just develop policy without it being tied down to an original idea. Once we have that, I think then we can move the needle a bit further and investigate how then do we implement. And that's a good question. Implementation, enforcement, alongside the multiplicity of moving parts keeps me up at night. So maybe we can have this discussion over a cocktail.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So I think we'll do, of course, the other panelists may have responses to the question. So I think we'll start with Prof on the extreme end. Come to Bonita, jump you, Paul, have Tal and the other Paul conclude, and then wrap it up.
Thanks. I don't get the point for when you ask the question.
The AU
From California. Tal peut-être répondre parce que je suis du Sénégal que réellement les travaux au niveau africain. Donc je préfère laisser Tal peut-être répondre s'il a plus d'arguments que moi. Par contre, si c'est pour le cas spécifique du Sénégal, je pourrais juste donner quelques pistes par rapport à la stratégie nationale sur l'intelligence artificielle. Parce qu'en tant qu'universitaire, de manière basique, j'ai plus réfléchi sur les aspects juridiques de la stratégie d'intelligence artificielle plutôt que sur l'intelligence artificielle en tant que phénomène global. Et quand il s'agit de l'encadrement juridique, au Sénégal, nous en sommes à la mise au point de Regulatory Sandbox. Parce que nous nous sommes rendus compte qu'avoir une loi spécifique à l'IA avec un corps de règles pour une innovation qui n'est pas encore achevée n'est pas une bonne approche. On ne peut pas avoir des textes de loi clairs, du droit dur, alors que l'innovation est encore en train de faire son chemin. Là, nous étions en train de parler de l'IA de manière générale. Aujourd'hui, l'IA générative est en train de prendre beaucoup de terrain. La meilleure approche pour nous consiste aujourd'hui à expérimenter des cas de régulation spécifiques, Tala l'a rappelé tout à l'heure, avec les industries créatives culturelles. Nous sommes personnellement, là, j'accompagne un projet d'utilisation de l'IA dans le cadre de l'enseignement de l'histoire générale du Sénégal. Comment développer à partir de l'IA un chatbot qui va permettre aux élèves sénégalais en langue nationale et en langue française de pouvoir apprendre l'histoire, d'interagir avec cette intelligence afin d'adapter leur cursus de formation à leurs besoins, à leurs spécificités cognitives. Donc c'est à travers ces petits projets que nous sommes en train de développer un cadre d'encadrement de l'IA. Maintenant, si c'est au plan africain, bon, je suis désolé, je ne suis pas en train de suivre le développement de la stratégie de l'IA en Afrique de manière globale.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about data governance. And my parting shots are mainly two things. One, let's make data and data resources accessible to all the stakeholders in the different formats, because most of the time, even when we collect data, when we write reports, then we'll refer you, go to our website, some people it may be challenging, but let's make this information. As policy, we've worked on that issue. I have this with me. This is all our work. It's all here about data protection and data privacy. It's a deck. We'll also share with people. So let's come up with formats where we can make data accessible to our stakeholders, to partners. Then the other one that I will conclude with is collaboration between civil society, academia, and government in all data governance processes so that we avoid working in silos. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Paul already answered the question about having two AI strategies and data governance framework. I believe this is more likely political, and the need here is that African governments or regional governing bodies or the Africa Union or ECOWAS need to have all initiatives under control, and tell all international partners, funders, and technical specific partners for the continental political agenda. It may be different because it will follow technically the agenda of the donor, the partners, the cooperation, or and they need to work together to have the agenda aligned with continental needs and also answering to insights that the funders want to have at the end of the year. And for the conclusions, I would like to thank the FIFA for having us in this session, and also congratulate the NIL team in Senegal. They are doing a great job. They are involved also in data policies and initiative in Africa, in Senegal specifically, and thanks to CIPESA and the Amnesty, and we'll network after the session.
Yeah, thanks. Parting shots, thanks to NIL for putting together this session. They have funded some of our research, so we thank you, and also being able to share. But more importantly, I think we need to do a lot of collaborations, because we all bring different expertise on the table. And the things we are dealing with, data governance, and a new one that I think the gentleman has spoken about, AI, they are new concepts. Many of us are still grappling with them, and the people who are legislating around these concepts also, I want to say that many of them have no idea what they are legislating about, because I think until 3-4 years ago, many people didn't think about AI, but because of OpenAI and ChatGPT, everybody thinks the experts about AI. And how AI function is that, especially generative AI, it uses existing data. It is trained on existing data to be able to predict some of the responses, especially if you prompt. So if it has wrong data, then it means the answers it will give you will be skewed. And we are always complaining that Africa is always biased in how it is represented. But we are legislating that our data should not be available to be trained, to be used for training large language models. So then how do we balance? We want to be well represented, but we are not willing to, one, have accurate and updated data that can be shared and be used. So there are issues. How much data should you allow large language modelers to train to be used for training? But also, we need to build the capacity for people who are legislating about these issues, for people advocating about these issues. When we are speaking, we speak from a point of knowledge. We are talking about, I think, cybercrime. I'm not sure how many of the data protection authorities are working with the cybercrime units in the security agencies to harmonize what they should be looking out for. And so we need to do a lot of more collaborations, especially from different entities, so that when you're legislating, when you're implementing, and when you're arresting some of these culprits, we know exactly what we are going to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for concluding remarks. And of course, massive thank you to the panelists for sharing your thoughts and insights on this Thursday evening, quite late. Just been asked to check if there's someone by the name Aminti Emile in this room. Aminti Emile. Doesn't look like there's one. If you know them, please ask them to see the ladies in blue. There's something that they may have left somewhere. Other than that, just to thank all of us for sitting late to participate in this session, from the panelists to the audience, and also importantly our translators and crew at the back. Just one round of applause for everyone. Thank you very much, and I believe there should be another event after this. I think the cocktails. So it's not me to welcome you to it, but I think we can proceed to the cocktails. Thank you very much and good evening. I think you'll do one group photo for the speakers, and then Class is dismissed.